Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley, for setting all of this up and making all of what you do available to all of us. And I will just get started. Heidi and I are the founders of Coastal Haven Families, and we're just going to do an overview of our project, why we did it, what our vision for the project was, the model that we used, and why we chose that particular model. And then we'll go a little bit into how it all came together, what worked for us, what didn't work for us, what we really screwed up along the way and wish we had done differently, and maybe that'll save someone from making the same mistakes, and then where we see the project going from here, and that should leave lots of time at the end for questions.
Okay, can folks see the slides though? Does that work?
Yes.
Okay, great. So again, thank you, Ashley and Together for Choice. We've been admirers of your organization and participants for, I think, since the beginning. So we're delighted to be able to share this. Our son, Noah, we have two sons, and our oldest is the inspiration for this project. And he was born with a lot of difficulties that we won't go into, but he's multi-impaired, both with physical and developmental disabilities. And as he got older, this is the classic story we've all faced, what happens after we're gone. We're all very familiar with that. And like every parent, I think we wanted him to have the fullest life possible, and still obviously meet his quite profound needs for support and care. And we looked at a lot of different options in our area here in California, Northern California, but we did look outside of our area as well, and we just were not seeing anything, partly because he's also on a feeding tube and has quite profound physical disabilities, that his option looked primarily like a medical home or a nursing home, which was not what we wanted for him. And in particular, there was one model I just wanted to point out for people that they can look up later, which was the L'Arche community up in Tacoma, Washington, Tahoma Hope, which was on a 15-acre farm, and that inspired us a lot. Noah is, this is him dancing at one of the many get-togethers in our community, and he's very social. He really loves to be with people and to be, just in the milieu, even if there are activities going on that he can't physically participate in, he really likes to be around folks. So it was not an option for us to create something where he would be living by himself or in an apartment alone. It just would not have met his needs, and more importantly, was not his preference. So if you could go to the next slide, Ashley, thank you. We wanted to do a shared housing option. And this was our wish list. This was sort of the thinking we did early on in the project, which was we obviously didn't want him isolated. We wanted to make sure that there was stable housing. We had heard some scary stories about families that had created housing for their kids, and then either land was sold out from under them or costs went up or they lost leases or whatever. We wanted to make sure that wasn't going to happen here. And then it was really important to us, because it's important to us as a family, that Noah have access to nature and also to activities that were meaningful to him, that he had a chance to develop relationships with his peers. Once school was out and that cliff happens, we really wanted to find ways for him as an adult to have those experiences. We obviously wanted the environment to be safe and to have some oversight. We wanted also to be sure that if we did all of this and it turned out not to be what he wanted or where he would thrive, we knew we didn't have the financial resources to turn around and do something else without getting our resources back. So that was a driver for us in terms of choosing the model that we picked. And again, he wanted to live with housemates, so we wanted to help facilitate that for him. But we also knew that he would want his own private space to retreat to if he needed or wanted it. So every home in our community has a private bedroom for each resident. And then we were very drawn to what's called a pocket neighborhood. There's a great book on pocket neighborhoods that I recommend if this model interests you. And it does involve a cluster of homes. It's not actually a model designed for people with disabilities, but we adopted it because we felt like the design features really gave us a lot of our wish list. And we're in an urban area, but we're on a rural parcel. We kind of have a unique site here where we're 3/4 of a mile from downtown Santa Cruz, in an urban area, but we're on almost 7 acres here. So we really wanted both those things to exist and our kids to have access to the wider world. And of course, we wanted to make sure nothing was going to financially fail, but also socially. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later and what we mean by that in terms of relationship building, but also really the last point I think cannot be overemphasized, which is the importance of creating a setting that really prioritizes the people who are providing the support. I think that not enough can be said about this. You know, as parents, we're all looking to the future and trying to figure out who's going to do what we do when we're not here anymore. And that really is the critical piece, I think. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But we wanted our design to support those folks. So the model we chose, and Philippe's going to go into this in a lot more detail, but the model we chose was an LLC, or what you also hear referred to as an family equity model. We created two entities, actually. We created a nonprofit to operate Common Roots Farm, which is the adjacent parcel to where our kids live. And we created an LLC, or limited liability corporation, with partner families. And our opening slide for every meeting we have is that we're here to share equally in the risks and work and rewards of creating a lifelong home for our kids. So the LLC model, if you're not familiar with it, allows families to purchase a share. And then if needs change, desires change, you know, people move, whatever, the opportunity exists to sell that share to someone else who may be on a wait list, and to be able to then take those resources and do whatever it is you believe, you know, is right for your child. The LLC operating agreement is an important document that lays out the basic rules and process for how these families will interact and how the entity will operate. But it also allows for changes and adaptations if needed. We won't go into the details of that, but that is a critical piece that folks who might be interested in the LLC model would want and need to know about. The other thing is I had experience developing nonprofit corporations before in social services, and we initially thought we would be doing this model as a nonprofit altogether, and for a variety of reasons, but primarily one that we really did want to make sure any investment Philippe and I made in this community and anything that our partner families made would be available to them again upon exit if they needed to exit. And that's not feasible under a nonprofit model. So that was one of the reasons that we made that decision. Okay, and next slide, Ashley. Great, thank you. Common Roots is our neighboring parcel. So we took a single parcel and subdivided it, and the farm is about 4.5 acres of our nearly 7 acres. And folks can look Common Roots. We have a Facebook page and, you know, Instagram and social media. So there's lots out there about us if you'd like to learn more. But the objective here was really, you know, the answer to the question about how do we help people with IDD have meaningful lives and purposeful lives and be able to contribute to their communities. So we felt access to a natural setting, and the beauty of that is good for people, for all of us, and we wanted that to be there. We also wanted plenty of activities going on. We all like different things, and so we wanted to have a broad menu of opportunities, really thinking about this almost like a farm campus upon which lots of activities can be overlaid and made available. And we wanted those things to be available to all of our community, you know, to not just people with IDD, and certainly not just the people living at Coastal Haven, but we wanted there to be broader opportunities for everyone. You know, I feel strongly that that's how barriers get broken down. That's how people get to know one another and begin to see the value that exists in each of us. And you can't really do that if you're segregated and isolated. But similarly, critically important that our son and everyone be able to choose who they hang out with. And for Noah, it's a lot of his peers who also have IDD. And that was a priority for us as well. So, you know, and just the last point really is to note that, you know, there is this persistent view, I think, in our society that folks like our kids really don't have a lot to contribute. They have a lot of needs and not a lot to contribute. And I think that's quite wrong. But I think if the environment is set up in such a way and the supports are there, we are proving it, I think, every day here at Common Roots. People with disabilities are helping to feed their community, donating food, doing lots of great stuff around environmental restoration, habitat restoration. So there's a lot of good stuff happening that I think works on many different levels. And so the farm was the tool we chose to be able to do that. This slide is really more for reference. So Common Roots made a decision very early on in our existence to be a production farm. So we're not a day program, we're not a community garden, but we do invite day programs and community gardening you know, entities to come and do that here. And that's happening actually right now as we speak. 3 days a week, we have day programs coming to the farm and enjoying the space and doing activities, and another recreational group that has a garden club, and they meet here as well. So we do paid internships. There's a program in California, I don't know if it's nationwide, but that offers pre-employment training that's paid by the state and the Department of Rehabilitation here for people with IDD to have internships. But those internships are not available if you're not in a typical, quote unquote, typical workplace. And because Common Roots is a production farm and not a specialized program just for people with disabilities, we are able to offer those paid internships here to our target population. So that's been a really great thing to see unfold. We do have some folks with disabilities on our payroll here on the farm, and we also do a lot of training of post-secondary students, that 18 to 22 group that's learning vocational skills, you know, and figuring out the next steps of their own lives. We have programs from various school districts in our area who are coming to the farm and taking advantage of the opportunities that are here for learning. So we also host art classes. We're about to start a cooking class. You know, not everybody wants to farm, but I think everybody benefits from being in this milieu. And so as we get going, and we're going to be building a barn this year, it will allow us to offer a really wider array of activities and programs for people with disabilities and without, including on the weekends, which is often kind of a dead time and downtime for folks once we have that indoor space. So I know that's a lot. I'm talking a little bit quickly, but it's because I think really we want to get to the next part, which is kind of the nuts and bolts of how our community came together. This is just a shot of our post-secondary, one of our post-secondary groups, and with a little bit of the farm in the background. So you can see from the photo, we have folks with physical disabilities. We have a young man who is blind, and most of the folks in that photo are post-secondary students learning skills before they head off for their adult lives. So I think I'm going to turn it to Philippe.
All right. So here's more of the nuts and bolts of it. What did we do? So the first thing that we needed to do was to kind of go from knowing that we wanted to help Noah get the type of life that he would enjoy, to filling in the details and writing it all down, and then creating a plan for how we would do that and a budget for how it would be paid for. And after, as Heidi said, looking at doing it as a nonprofit, we decided to do it as a partnership of families. So that one of the early steps was to create this LLC. And that comes with a lot of other issues if you're going to sell memberships in the LLC that we also had to deal with. And then we kind of took our show on the road and presented to other parents, groups of other parents, and let them know that we were putting this together and explain what we were doing and asked those who were interested and for whom our model resonated as what they want, they and their families wanted to join us. And I think that was important because there were a lot of people who maybe wanted something different or wanted 80% of what we wanted. And as we present to more and more people, I think that trying to change what we wanted to please the different input would have had us spinning our wheels for a long time and never really getting something that everyone liked. So we really focused on defining what we wanted to do and finding people who wanted to do that with us. We, in parallel with that, looked at where it could happen. And we knew we wanted and needed to be near an urban center. We knew we didn't want it to be too hot in the summers and lots of different things. And we finally found the right parcel of land and then worked on purchasing that and getting everyone on board for it. And the next slide is kind of what was the everything else. So we had to make sure that the parcel that we wanted would be compatible with what we wanted to do. We needed to do an architectural design for the housing, make sure that they would be accessible, make sure that they would meet the planning requirements. And while we were doing our planning for the housing and the physical community, the farm was also getting up and running, which we had talked about early. Do we do the farm first? Do we do the housing first? And we decided to do the farm first. And that was a really good choice on our part, because what it did was establish us as a group in the community that was providing good things, both for the local population of people with disabilities and for the wider community that were interested in being on the land. And that reputation helped us get through a lot of the planning questions and issues that would have been hard without having that cred. We also worked with architects on the, on the design. When I say two of them, it's because our first architect, I'll come back to this later as something that we learned, we had to drop because we weren't getting the kind of design that we wanted. And then we also brought in engineers and designers and civil engineers, structural, just all of these different people in specialties that, although I had built 2 homes before, I had to learn that building 10 homes is not like building 1 home 10 times, because as when you scale up, you need to comply with a lot of laws and regulations that don't apply when you're building a single home. We had to work with lawyers. At one point, I counted that we had 10 of them, each with their own little subspecialty, and all of that needed to be coordinated. And of course, the accountant, and then some of the specialties were the surveyors. We had to bring in an architectural historian because we had an existing historic structure, archaeologists because there were Native Americans previously living on our land, an arborist so that we made sure that we were protecting our riparian resources and our existing trees. So just huge amounts of moving pieces and things that needed to be checked off. So at the end of all of this, what we created were 9 new homes, 7 of them 4-bedroom, 2 of them 5-bedroom. And we also built a 2.5 car garage that's shared between all the homes. for people to stow things like extra wheelchairs and joggers and bicycles and all the things that don't really fit in a house, but people need day to day. And as part of our goals of having eyes and ears and safety and community interaction for the people who live here, we have a visitor studio above the garage that's available for free to any visitors. And part of that was so that when our kids' relatives, siblings, parents, aunts, uncles, whatever, or friends come to visit, we wanted them to be able to see what day-to-day life was like for their loved one and not be in town, come pick them up and bring them back at the end of the day and never really see how things are actually going here and if everything is good. What we did is we used 6 of our homes are lived in by our kids, for lack of a better word. We have 2 families that are on the overall site, and we are renting 2 of the homes to college students. And that's been a good mix of people for us in terms of not isolating our kids. And as we designed the housing, we also kind of planned ahead for aging in place by making everything as physically accessible as we could, and also pre-designing for what's required of a licensed care home, so that if we ever needed to convert some of our housing to licensed care, we at least would have the physical housing ready to do that. And like Heidi mentioned, we started with a close to 7-acre lot that we subdivided, and the farm is right adjacent in the lot that we created by subdividing. And so that allows for a lot of farm interaction for those that want it. And it's now been about 2.5 years since our first residents moved in. And so far it's going really well. And this is what our housing looks like from a drone view. You can see the homes have no garages, and that was done on purpose so that people would have a place to cross by each other as they came and went and to interact. Same that every home has a covered porch where people can hang out and also have more opportunities for interaction. Every home also has as many solar panels as we could fit, because we're in this for the long term and we wanted to keep the operating costs down to the greatest extent that we could.
And I'm just going to add that a pocket neighborhood design, you can't see it in this slide, but in the lower right corner is a parking lot, because of course we have support professionals coming in every day to support our member residents' kids. And our kids have visitors, and paratransit comes and goes. So the parking that you don't see on here is designed. None of our member families' kids drive, but they certainly have visitors and staff who do. And that is offset, as Philippe said, so that what we call Main Street, this photo doesn't show any landscaping that we have now, but that Main Street is a pedestrian friendly area, a common area, and not intruded on by cars.
Yeah, and it also has a shared barbecue and grill and outdoor kitchen to encourage get-togethers. And here is the Main Street Grill. So behind that group of people is our Main Street Grill, and we have parties there regularly. We just had one like a week ago for a couple of birthdays.
So some of our families, a few years ago.
And so I'll let Heidi talk about services and why.
Okay. Or actually not services.
Yes, or not services.
So our model has Coastal Haven being a landlord, or what I like to call kind of a landlord plus. but we are not service providers. Philippe and I were very clear that provision of services to our population is not our area of expertise. And so we really had in mind from the beginning the supported living services model for our residents who have disabilities. So everyone, I think folks are probably familiar with this, but if you're not, SLS or supported living services is what you're going to want to learn about if you're interested in seeing what we did. But essentially every individual with a disability has the legal right to select an entity to provide support for them through supported living. And so we actually have 3 different agencies for what are about 18 residents now in our community. And people choose those agencies, and those agencies themselves meet once a month with a parent committee from Coastal Haven to just iron out, whatever comes up. The gate broke, what are we going to do if we've set up emergency plans, evacuation plans if needed, all those kinds of things that have to do with the long and short-term safety of our residents, but also quality of life, getting out announcements about upcoming birthday parties and, social events. One of the agencies, for example, is hosting a Memorial Day get together and lunch here on Monday. It'll be held on the farm, but everybody's invited who's here in the community. So it's an opportunity to have that kind of communication. But Coastal Haven is not providing those services. And I think that's an important thing and for people to understand, because it is a distinction that is different, for example, from licensed care. And so that's just an important point to make, I think, for those who are learning. Parents are now in our model providing the leadership. Philippe remains the manager of the LLC. He has broadened that to include a management committee and we have a lot of expertise thanks to a broad range of parents. And that expertise, though it's lodged with parents currently, our intention and plan is that after 10 years, so we're at about 8 years now, our mortgage will be paid off and the rental income from our community and every resident who's here, whether they are member families or the other tenants that Philippe described, students and so forth, all have a lease and all pay rent. And that rental income is the LLC's income. And after that 10-year period, when our mortgage is paid off, and frankly, we are all probably too old to want to do or be able to do this anymore, we will have the resources at that point, or potentially sooner if the LLC decides to do that, to hire paid staff to provide what parents are currently providing. We do have a gentleman who is an expert in facilities work, and he's here a lot. I don't know that we could all expect somebody like that to have a commitment as regularly as Mike does, but he is amazing and he does this work professionally and has been a huge help on the ground here for us, just running a property and all the things that come up. We have a conflict resolution committee so that we can resolve issues that may come up between housemates in particular, or families or whatever. And again, folks who share in the property management, rental collection, those kinds of jobs. And we also say it's really important to celebrate together. We just celebrated 2 of our residents had 30th birthdays last weekend, and we did a work day on the farm for a couple of hours and then gathered for a celebration of those individuals. And we think, for building community and building relationships, that's the culture we want to establish. And thankfully our families are very much on board with that. So in terms, I think you should talk about this.
So, what worked for us? Well, the first thing that worked for us was as Heidi and I described our vision and went through what was at first just really, really rough budgeting and financial plan, we found enough families to be interested and to take it to the next step. And that was really pretty risky of families to just hear, a couple of presentations from people they didn't know, and then to say, yeah, I'll bet my kids, future on this. and here's a big check to pay for it. So that was our first big hurdle. We were also very lucky as we did this, that a lifelong family friend is an experienced developer and investor, and he gave us a lot of help. And if you don't, if you don't have that kind of friend in your life, then you need to find someone, and you don't have that knowledge yourself, then you really need to connect with a professional who can bring that in and make sure that all the numbers work. The other thing that we did right was we kept our vision, and the things on our wish list, those were inviolate. We knew what we needed, and we knew what we wanted to create. But at the same time, getting there can happen a lot of different ways. And as some avenues turned out to not work or could be improved on, we changed. So our first plan was to subdivide the existing land into 3 relatively small residential lots, build 3 houses and 3 cottages, and that would be 15 members. As we worked with city planning, we got more flexibility than we expected from them, so we changed our plans. And we had to change our plans several times along the way, but every time we were always guided by our goal and our vision, which really we had to be true to. And next slide.
Okay.
The other thing that we had success with was as we described what we were creating and who we were creating it for, we got a lot of support and interest from city planners and also from the wider community in Santa Cruz. And that was a big help. We also were very fortunate that with the number of families that we had a lot of varied skills to draw from. And the other thing was we just didn't stop. When we talked to one group that said that they wanted to do something like this, but the city water company was giving them grief about their meter. We got that too, and 100 other things, but you just cannot let any of these things stop you, because if you do, that'll just kill the whole project. Next slide. The impact on parents, the biggest impact is knowing that our kids have a home that is secure for the rest of their lives. On these particular parents that are sitting here right now, we are taking the longest vacation that we have had in 28 years since Noah was born in about a week, and we'll be gone for 7 whole days. On our residents, we have seen a really wonderful change in a lot of them as they feel more independence. They have their own home, their own room. They're working with different personalities and different support staff, and really seeing them blossom and kind of grow up in a way that they're not with mom and dad anymore. And they will be able to have those skills for when mom and dad just aren't here anymore. We also feel like we've taken a load off of our kids' siblings, because they can grow up knowing that they don't have to worry about caring for their sibling for the rest of their lives. And they the siblings are starting to get to know each other a little bit, because they'll be the generation that, even though they don't have to be hands-on all the time, will kind of be watching over things. And we've also seen a lot of good things happening from people who participate on the farm, whether that's skill building or just the feeling that they're doing useful work. They get to hang out with different people. Some of them have had their first job ever here and have been able to move on to other jobs if they wanted to. Next slide. Things that we did well was, again, keeping track of what we wanted and didn't want, and just putting a firm no on the things that we didn't want. And at the end of all this, the project cost about $11 million. And that breaks down to about $3.5 million for the land, about $6.5 million for the construction, about $1 million in taxes, fees, permits, etc. And the rest of it was for professional design services and and the like, just to keep the whole thing moving. We are providing homes for 19 adults. We have also created this community resource in the farm, and we expect to have all of it paid off in 10 years, which will be 8 years from now. Next slide. And here is our motto, quitting is unacceptable. Next slide. We did some things that we should have done better. If something goes south and you kind of know that it's not going well, I think that as the manager who was running it, I waited too long on some things and gave people too many chances and hoped that they would pull it out. They mostly didn't. I would have been better off just saying, this isn't working, let's move on. The other thing is really to trust your gut. If you get a bad feeling about someone, just walk away. And sometimes, kind of similar to the first point, is when you see a problem, what I tend to do is to kind of wait, give people time, and then check in with them. And really, I should have checked more frequently on progress and intervened rather than wait until things were really, really late. The other thing that I did that I could have done better was not sharing the workload as much as I could have. And that was largely because I often felt like I was the only one that had all the pieces in my head, and it would take me longer to explain it and then work with someone and then have meetings to see what was going on than to just do it. But I think that it put more work on me, and it also prevented others in our community from being in a position to step in and take over when I'm done being manager. And the other thing that we did was we started off having a pretty long process to bring people in with, potlucks and barbecues and meetings in the park, et cetera, et cetera. With COVID, that became impossible. And when COVID ended, we didn't restore that as much as we should have. And we should have, we should not have reduced that time. Next slide. Lessons learned. Starting the farm first was a good thing. It helped us get community credibility. The kids have to enjoy being here, not just the parents. Make sure that all of the partners share your values, because sometimes people really want to know that they have a place, and they may agree to things that down in their heart they don't really agree with, and that just will bring you problems later. And in case you do get those problems, include an involuntary exit clause. You don't want to do that lightly, but in case, for some reason there is a member who really shouldn't be there, there needs to be a way to resolve that. We all tried to share all the work evenly. It's hard to make that happen. And like most projects, you wind up with 80% of things being done by 20% of the people. And it's usually the same 20%. The last thing is to track every dollar that you spend and every day in your schedule, because if no one else is going to do that for you, and it's not cheap to do because, you know, like I said, it cost us $11 million to bring this to fruition. And if that number sounds high to people who live away from our area, the median house price here is $1.3 million. So it kind of scales. Next slide. Let's see. Everyone will do what is best for them. So you have to be sure to keep track of it so that you get what's best for you and make sure that people's incentives, you know, match the goals that you have, not the goals that they have. The last one is community is what this is all about, and it is the hardest thing. Buildings and land are easy. There are, you know, it's been done before, there are solutions to it. The community is the tough part. Next slide. Next slide is an aerial view of a recent event here. And you can see the farm. There's a stage with music set up. If you really look closely, you can see Noah in a wheelchair in front of the stage. He did not move away from the music until the last note, and our housing in the background. And this is what it's all about for us and why we did all of this. So now we can open it up to questions.